I'm Aram Choe, and this is my story for His glory. I'm a husband, a father of four. I'm a professor, a police officer, and when I've got spare time, I try to make people laugh on the internet. I have a pretty popular platform on social media called 911Strong, and I use it to further my message. It's my ministry, if you will. And if you're meeting me for the first time, you're probably wondering what that message is. You probably assume that I don't have a care in the world because I'm always making light of situations, but there's a reason behind that. Initially, when I started my social media platform as 911Strong, it was to show people that police officers were human, that we weren't just a uniform, we weren't just a badge, that there was an actual human with a heartbeat behind the uniform. And unfortunately, in the mainstream media and in the news, we get vilified for our actions. And I'm here to spread the message that a lot of that negative attention comes from less than 1% of police officers across the country. The rest of the 99.9% of us who do a really good job every day don't get that fair chance to be highlighted in the news. Why? Well, it doesn't sell. And if you don't know by now, the news is a business. They want to portray what they think is going to sell a story. So I took it up to myself to get on the internet and post some videos and some positive messages about police officers, and people gravitated towards it. It reaffirmed my belief that people want to hear good news out there. They don't want to be constantly bombarded with negativity. Right about when that started, I was kind of going through some struggles and some trials in my personal life. So this happy-go-lucky guy that you see now wasn't so happy. About 2014, my dad had just passed away. We were kind of reeling from an unexpected death. He had committed suicide. Nobody knew my dad had any problems. He was living life like everybody else. He had a business where he was thriving, and we just didn't know what the reason was. Turns out he was fighting some internal demons that he shielded from the rest of us, and that took a lot to get over. And what was left behind was my mom and myself. I'm an only child, and my mom was grief-stricken and had a lot of guilt. Fast forward a year later, after my dad's passing, when we were just trying to recover and pick up the pieces, my mom found out she had stage 3C ovarian cancer, and she had large cancerous masses that took over almost her entire torso. So she had to have very invasive surgery and went through a lengthy chemo process, but she beat it. And we were so happy that she was going to be able to thrive and live the second half of her life very happy. At about 1 in the morning on January 7th, I was laying in bed, getting ready to work the next morning. I get a phone call from one of my childhood best friends. And I went to school with my friend Ben. We played football together, and we'd always race to my house after school to see who can get there first. And sure enough, Ben would, and my mom would always have a hot plate of Korean food for him. That's the one thing he never got at home. So Ben had a fondness to my mom, and my mom had a fondness to Ben. And it just killed me inside looking back, knowing that Ben was the one that took the phone call from Oceanside Police, informing him that my mom had been murdered. So Oceanside is a community in San Diego County. It's about 2.5 hours from LA. That's where my mom's side of the family lived, in all over San Diego County. So she chose to live there. And my mom entered a relationship with a man that lasted just a couple weeks. It was very apparent to her he was interested in my mom's possessions and not my mom. But this is a testament to the kind of woman she was. She allowed him to live rent-free in one of her properties just until he can get back on his feet. And what was supposed to only be a couple months ended up being a couple years. And my mom thought enough was enough. She was getting ready to retire and wanted to liquidate everything. And she had made arrangements to pick up the keys from him at this property. And when my mom went to the doorstep, he ambushed her and kidnapped her in her own property. And what had happened next was pieced together to me by the Oceanside Police Department. Their forensics team had determined there was a struggle inside, and she was restrained in a chair, and she was shot in the head from behind. And then her assailant had killed himself shortly after in the same residence. And I could see how difficult it was for the detective over at Oceanside to explain this to me. In our line of work, we've got to talk to families of victims all the time. And after a while, you kind of get desensitized to it and calloused to it, and it becomes easier. But I think when you're facing a colleague, you can't help but feel empathy. I know it was really difficult for this detective to tell me what had happened, but I was really appreciative of Oceanside PD's sensitivity and empathy and the way they treated me and my family throughout this whole ordeal. Moving forward, going to the interview process for a promotional exam at work, I was really, really surprised to see that there was an Oceanside administrator sitting on my panel made up of outside panelists. Historically, our panelists would all come from neighboring agencies. For the first time in my, what was then an 18-year career, to see that someone had come from such a distance was just beyond what a coincidence would describe. But the processes involved to go not just 2 or 3 counties away it's exhaustive, but it happened. And it wasn't until the interview concluded that I stood up to shake the panelist's hands that he held my hand just a little longer and told me he was very familiar with my mom's case and offered his condolences. And my focus had shifted immediately. And on that drive home, I was just trying to think how that happened. How did this coincidence happen? I had to believe that it was God's intervention. It was beyond a coincidence that the stages leading up to that day had to happen for a reason. It was just too much to say that it was chance or coincidence. So when I share this with people who tell me that they don't believe that they can leave things up to chance, or if they don't believe that they can leave something so critical to prayer, I tell them, well, that's exactly what I did, and the outcome was what it was. People who don't know me, when I share the story with them, they don't believe that it's true. And unfortunately, when they don't want to believe, they'll come up with their own narrative and their own ideas of what happened, and for them that was coincidence. But I'm reminded of Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So with all that was going on, I was finishing my last semester, trying to get my master's degree, which seemed like an unsurmountable task. My first instinct was to quit. But it was at the encouragement of my fellow students and my professors at the university that they really encouraged me to push on. I think they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and that was possibly further involvement in the university. And they were really excited at the fact that I was this guy that was removed from college for about 18 years and came back and hit it with such zeal. And I was really excited at the opportunity to go back to school and finish something that I couldn't finish 18 years prior. So they asked me to interview for a teaching assistant position. And it paid $15 an hour, and it obviously wasn't for the money, but for the opportunity to further my experience with the school. And throughout the process of interviewing, they thought that my love for the school and my enthusiasm for education would be best suited in the role as an adjunct professor. And if you had known me in high school, you would never say Aram Choe and professor in the same story, unless that story indicated I was getting in trouble by professor. And here I am. I successfully went through the process of becoming a professor at a Division I private Christian university. It just blows my mind. It's given me another opportunity to speak to students and to be able to mentor and mold young minds from a Christian perspective, but from an understanding perspective as someone that's understands social media and understands this new generation. So, lost my dad, I lost my mom, and even though I have a wife and kids of my own, I really felt like I lost my safety net. I mean, they were my immediate family for most of my life, and to lose them in both tragic ways was really hard. And I guess it would be enough to break somebody if they've totally felt alone. But the truth is, when you're facing tragedy like that, it really forces you to look at yourself from within. You know, my dad didn't have faith in his heart. He really felt like he had no other options but to take his own life, and I think that was truly because he didn't expect there to be a life after this. And I grew up in church with my mom. My dad wasn't a believer, and I know that after this life, and no matter what pains you go through, that this is just temporary, and that there's so much more to look forward to. And I know God equipped me with big shoulders for a reason, to carry a lot of burden and to carry the burden of others sometimes. This time it really felt like it was overwhelming, like it was just too much for me. So I felt the need to put up this front of humor, and I guess by accident, I found a really healthy outlet, and that was through social media. I found that when I put funny videos out on the internet and it made other people laugh, that it made me laugh. When I laughed and other people laughed, it became infectious, and the message spread and grew, and I really felt a calling there, and I really felt like the timing was right. God presented me with an opportunity to minister to other people and show that no matter how bad you think your day is going, no matter how bad you think it seems and that you can't push on, that I can sit you down and tell you it's going to be okay, because I went through it. If you're going through personal trials and personal struggles and you feel like there's just no light at the end of the tunnel, that's just because your tunnel's longer than other people's tunnels. If you stay persistent and travel through that tunnel, knowing that there's going to be light at the end of it, I think you'll find that the outcome and your perspective is going to be so much better. If you rely on someone greater than yourself, knowing that you were put here for a purpose, and that purpose was given to you by God, that you can handle anything. My name is Aram Choe, and this is my story for His glory.